And then we also have Mr. Tommaso Sgobba. He is the president of the International Association for the Advancement of Space Safety, located in the Netherlands. Now, when I lived in Brussels at NATO headquarters, I noticed that all the Dutch always went to Italy anytime they could. He's one of the rare Italians who's actually gone to the Netherlands, where he is working, promoting space safety. He's also the vice president of the US-based International Space Safety Foundation. He joined the European Space Agency in 1989, where he's responsible for space flight safety. Before that, he had 13 years in the aeronautic industry. Many of you may remember former commander of STRATCOM and our last vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Cartwright, asking us time and again, do we need an ICAO for space? Well, Mr. Sgobba has actually written the book about what an ICAO for space would look like. And so he's going to challenge us today to think a little bit more in the future and think about what type of mechanisms and international cooperation and standards do we need in the future. Turn now to Mr. Sgobba, who is the president of the International Association for the Advancement of Space Safety. Please.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this unique opportunity, and thanks very much to General Keller to having this association here represented today. Few words about the association itself. It was established 6 years ago in the aftermath of the Shuttle Columbia accident by a group of engineers working on the space station program. I would say that most of the concepts that we have developed and some of the points that I will make during this short presentation are rooted into the experience of the biggest ever international cooperation that is the International Space Station. Although we refer to the International Space Station as international, truly is a multinational effort in the sense that every piece of the station, as every segment, as we call it, remains under the jurisdiction and control of the country that has built and provided it. So to a large extent, the space station is an assembly on orbit of ships that fly together, but each one has its own responsible and authority, including authorities related to safety. And so we had for several years inside the space station program build certain understanding about how to work together into a program that was ongoing. We had to overcome a number of difficulties. Just to mention to you one, who is the commander of the space station? You cannot have a commander for several ships at the same time, being these ships under several flags. So eventually there was an international diplomatic effort through the various countries which had subscribed to the intergovernmental agreement for the space station, such that we could have a commander for the space station that was not a national of one in particular, but would rotate between the nation and have responsibility for the safety on orbit. We had to face enormous difficulties in coming to an agreement about standards, safety standards. Just to make an example, on the space station there are 2 waters. There is the Russian water and there is the American water. This is why the 2 countries could not agree on the way the minerals, the quantity of minerals and the quantity of microbes that would be allowed inside. Now, the water that will be transported in a few months from now to the space station through the European ATV vehicle comes from a stream in the Alps, north of Turin. And this water is collected for the Russians at low altitude, such that has a number of minerals inside, and silver is added, while the water for the American is collected by the same, at the same stream, but at a higher altitude where there are less minerals, and iodine is added. So this is the way it goes. Of course, on the space station, when the American water is finished, the Americans have a system such that they can extract the silver, add the iodine, and drink the Russian water. So this is to underline the fact that, as I said, some of the concept and principle that I will briefly touch upon during my presentation are truly the maturity or the result of long debates that we had somehow on a specialized topic for the space station. Next slide. So what I wanted to talk, and I will summarize basically here in the first slide my points. First, the fact that we need urgently a civil commercial organization for space. I say urgently, knowing that urgently may mean within a number of years. There is a proven and highly successful international organization model, ICAO, that has been very, very good and very useful in aviation, which in our view should be considered for organizing space, being supranational, not supranational, and based on shared interest. So basically, ICAO leaves the final authority in all the matter that counts to the member states of the organization. An international organization for civil and commercial space is also in the best interest of the military community because it can create interdependence, build confidence, and enhance transparency. The next point that I want to make is that the US can maintain leadership in such future organization by taking the initiative on its creation, including international SSA modeled on the air traffic control in use for international airspace. And aviation and space safety risks are becoming more and more intertwined. This is a point that I would like to underline. We are talking often about, on orbit, space debris, etc., but we are missing the fact that all the phases of a space mission are very much intertwined, and what is today a space debris can become tomorrow a threat for the public on ground, or even worse, for people traveling by air. Next slide. So this is just to summarize and draw your attention to the fact that nowadays, differently from the situation in the early 60s or late 50s, nowadays commercial is basically the driving force in the exploitation of space. Exploitation of space, in the association we have identified the need to clarify that truly nowadays we are not exploring space, at least not exploring all the space, but there is a region that goes up to geosynchronous orbit that is truly an exploitation space area, while there is one that goes beyond that is the truly exploration area. So commercial space applications are nowadays the drivers of use of space. Next one. Space debris and space traffic management. More and more space actors are coming to the stark realization that some of the current activity in outer space are unsustainable. For many years we have been working with the expectation that the so-called space debris mitigation effort could limit and stabilize the environment. Now we know that this stabilization is not going to come, and we will need another measure that is called space debris remediation, basically removing big chunks of space debris, upper stages, and spent satellites from orbit. This only will allow to stabilize the space debris environment and avoid a proliferation of debris, and also reduce the risk of collision. But in space, of course, there are not only debris, there are active objects, and we need to make sure that this active object do not face the risk of collision also between themselves. And this risk of collision, that was something that the expert knew since many years, became reality when Iridium and Cosmos collided recently. Next one. So what is good in the ICAO model? The ICAO convention does not apply to so-called state aircraft, so does not apply in particular to military aircraft. In this sense, the ICAO, let's say, convention is purely meant to deal with civil and commercial aviation, and all the so-called state aircraft and state activity are exempted from it. Of course, during operation, it is in the best interest also of the military operator in time of peace to follow the rules of the air traffic system. The ICAO Convention does not generate any prerogative, right, or obligation for individual nationals of the contracting states. Only national laws and regulation apply. In particular, it is stated into the article of the ICAO Convention that each contracting state undertakes to collaborate in securing the highest practical degree of uniformity. So there is no an absolute, let's say, commitment, but there is a commitment limited to what a single country deems practical possible. Further on, the ICAO Council can make recommendation when a country does not align its own national rules to the one of ICAO, but it is clearly stated that no contracting state shall be guilty of an infraction of this convention if it fails to carry out this recommendation. So basically, the ICAO Council can make a recommendation, but eventually is the state that decides. Now, the force of this model is therefore not the force of a supranational organization, but the force of the common interest. Which model for the international, for an international SSA? The model that we recommend, or we recommend for consideration, is the same that applies for international airspace. As you know, the national airspace, the airspace for which each country has full and complete authority, ends basically with the territorial waters. If I am correct, is something like 12 miles. Beyond that point, there is no authority from a state to control the airspace. But most of our international traffic, of course, takes place into the so-called international airspace. So how the system works? The system works that the countries, in particular those countries that are on the ocean, share the ocean water, they agree to take a delegation from the ICAO for providing air traffic services on these areas of the ocean which are otherwise outside their authority. And they apply more or less the same methods, rules, and means that they use for controlling the air traffic nationally. So the rules that has been in the meantime developed are very sophisticated and allow to a high degree of confidence in what each country does. What you see over there in the view graph is it's how the region, airspace region in the South Pacific are split between Chile and New Zealand. This is an area of particular interest because in that area lies what we call the waste basket of space, where we try to bring every bit and piece from space, which is the SPOA, the South Pacific Adriatic area. The next point that I would like to make is that the space and aviation are more and more intertwined. You know that there are progress in the so-called space tourism, so very soon we should have this coming year, the first commercial flights to the border of space or to space, depends the definition. All the infrastructure for space navigation and traffic control is moving from ground to orbit, in particular the various application of the global navigation system. Also, and in particular in Europe, we have a migration being organized of all the communication between aircraft and the control system to space, because Europe is the most densely, let's say, traffic area in the world in terms of aviation. Aviation has also an interest in space weather, because as soon as we are overflying the North Pole the North Pole, we expose the aircraft to space weather effect with a possible loss of safety critical function and system. Next one. This is to give you a glimpse to another concern that we have. On the left, you see, what is the density of air traffic in the United States during the daylight. What you see on the right is a small animation. This animation shows what happened the day in which the shuttle Columbia disintegrated during re-entry. You see the shuttle coming, and then there are dots that, if you can play again, those white dots are a representation of the real traffic that was ongoing that day while the space debris from the Columbia were falling down. There were aircraft that went through the falling debris field even twice. And the estimation at that time of the risk for aviation was in the order between 1 in 100 and 1 in 1,000 risk to have an aviation accident in the vicinity of this area. So basically, the day in which Columbia crashed, we have risked a major aviation accident. Why I am showing this now to you after so many years? What is the interest? The interest is that more or less every month, and sometimes even more than once per month, we have a system re-entering from space, and this system have the same characteristic in fragmenting and creating falling debris that the Columbia shuttle has in this animation. And it's sufficient, 300 grams, to kill an aircraft. So we have quite a concern in relation to space debris removal activities, because whenever we remove a spacecraft from orbit within the 25 years limit, we have to consider the risk for the ground population, but as I said, in particular the risk for aviation, because differently from ground population, aviation does not benefit of any kind of protection. Aircraft are more vulnerable. Next one. So what are the proposed steps from the, let's say, association point of view, International IAASS Association? First of all, the need to adopt the Code of Conduct for Space Operation, which is truly an important and essential step forward. Secondly, in US, which has always had an important leadership in this field, there should be some possibly extension of the mandate of FAA-AST, the Office of Space Transportation, such to cover also the licensing of on-orbit space operation, and also possibly to get control of the civil SSA STM services, which should also further integrated with the air traffic management system. There should be a definition of borders interface between military SSA and civil commercial SSA. This is truly an ongoing discussion in Europe in this moment with the current development of SSA capability in Europe, the definition of what belongs to whom and which data should be made public or not. And finally, there should be the starting of an intergovernmental cooperation for creating international voluntary space safety standards. Next step, of course, after this first step, is to think of extending the ICAO Convention to space. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. I've learned, I'm still learning about space, and I've just learned a lot from all of your interventions, so thank you very much.